When you need mealtime inspiration, it's worth shopping Kroger, where you'll find over 30,000 mouth-watering choices that excite your inner foodie. And no matter what tasty choice you make, you'll enjoy our everyday low prices, plus extra ways to save, like digital coupons worth over $600 each week. You can also save up to $1 off per gallon at the pump with fuel points. More savings and more inspiring flavors make shopping Kroger worth it every time. Kroger, fresh for everyone. Fuel restrictions apply.
We're excited to announce that our very own podcasting platform, Zencastr, has become a new sponsor to the show. Check out the podcast discount link in our show notes and stay tuned for why we love using Zen for the podcast.
You're listening to the Archaeology Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Archaeotech Podcast, episode 121. I'm your host, Chris Webster. Today I talked to Hector Orengo about archaeological drone survey. Let's get to it. Hector Orengo has held postdoctoral positions at the CNRS in France and the universities of Nottingham, Sheffield, and Cambridge in the UK. And I'm going to butcher this here, by the way, but he is currently the Ramon y Cajal researcher at the Catalan Institute of Classical Archaeology in Spain, where he co-directs the Landscape Archaeology Research Group and an honorary research associate at the MacDonald Institute for Archaeological Research of the University of Cambridge. He is a landscape archaeologist specialized in archaeomorphological analysis, that's a new word for me, remote sensing, geospatial analysis, and the development of computational approaches to archaeological questions. All right, welcome to the show, everybody. Paul could not join me today, but hopefully he'll be on here sometime in the future. But for now, we have a great interview coming your way, as I mentioned at the beginning. So, Hector, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Great. So the topic of the show, of course, is, I'll just read the title that I have here, Combination of Drone-Based Photogrammetry and Artificial Intelligence for Automated Archaeological Survey. So how did you decide to get into this and where did it come from?
I'm a landscape archaeologist. That's my main, I ended up doing lots of different stuff, but my main interest is landscape archaeology. And as such, I had to do quite a lot of surveying during the last 10 years. And it became very critical when I started working in Greece, despite I had quite a lot of experience surveying in Spain and in the UK and in France. But when I started surveying in Greece, man, that was a whole different scale. We were surveying in Thessaly some very early Neolithic sites, like 8,500 BP, which is okay. This would be Mesolithic in Spain, and the quantity of ceramics. To do a single line of surveying with a total counting of certs, it was around 7 hours, and the line was around 70, a bit less than 70 meters.
Yeah. So,
it was a torture. In Thessaly also, it's very, very hot during the summer, extremely cold during the winter. So, we had health issues there. Actually, we were using this cloud system to record our pot counts. And, the iPads and the mobiles were just shooting off. It was more than 40 degrees and they just couldn't work with this heat. So was, yes. We thought that we had to devise a system to do this at least faster. And, at the very least, at this moment, we were not thinking so much of quality. But, just to be able to do it in a reasonable amount of time, because, just to do the relatively small area we were working in Thessaly, it would have taken us many years at this rhythm.
Yeah. So I thought of this probably 5 years ago when I was working on a project in Southern California, and it was on a Navy base. And I'll tell you what, man, I had a crew of 8 people and they were employees of mine. And we were working on this Navy base that's used to test ordnance, like bombs and different things. And it's been used for that. Yeah. Right. It's been used for that for 70 years. And so we had unexploded ordnance technicians with us for each crew. We had 2 crews of 4, and each one had an unexploded ordnance technician with them, because if we saw anything that was metal or we didn't know what it was, we were supposed to point it out, and then they check it out to make sure it's not going to explode. And also there were rattlesnakes everywhere. And I just kept thinking, man, we surveyed 30,000 acres but only about 1,200 of it actually had sites that we recorded. So we spent 28,000 acres just waiting for someone to explode and get hurt. And I'm like, man, and there's almost no vegetation too. So if we could have just done a systematic drone survey and then gone out and tested the hits, maybe look at the video or photogrammetry and say, okay, there's possible sites here. Let's go out and ground truth those.
Yeah. That's the point. Yeah.
Exactly. So what's the vegetation like, and what kind of challenges did you have with coming up with the drone-based survey in the areas that you're referring to? Because I know vegetation and terrain and stuff like that is going to always be an issue. Yeah.
I mean, in fact, the paper went out in December, but we wrote it. I think in past February. So during this period of time, since we made the initial submission and the moment it was finally published, we have been working in these specific issues. I mean, the initial methodology was very much designed for landscapes like Thessaly. They're extremely flat, cultivation. They are under cultivation, so there are periods of time in which there's no vegetation and the visibility is very high. But it was evident that most people do not work in such excellent conditions. So our last developments actually include the programming of the drone to follow a specific height above ground. So when you are working, in fact, now we are working in this in several areas with topographical conditions that are not that easy, with the slopes and vineyards and fruit trees and some types of cultivation. And we have managed to develop a methodology that makes the drone to fly between the trees or between the rows of whatever is on cultivation and follow the slope. And it seems to be working pretty well. I mean, that's probably our next paper. So yes, that was a problem at the beginning, but now we have managed to solve it.
Yeah.
So yes, basically what we do is just to make a preliminary flight, a much higher altitude at around, 60, 70 meters, something that, it is going to give us a good output in terms of time. With a single flight, you can cover quite an area, and then you can get, with photogrammetry, you can get a really high resolution digital terrain model. So you have a model of the terrain which you use to program, and at the same time you have a ortho image photograph of the area. So you can actually program the drone following the natural slope and the vegetation. Nice. And you can filter the vegetation, of course. I mean, the drone is not the imagery is just photographs. So you cannot use a way to filter the vegetation, a method to filter the vegetation such as you would use with LiDAR that actually can penetrate vegetation. But you can actually select colors like, green leaves and a range of colors that you can simply eliminate and create a topography without these trees. So you can keep a constant height above ground when you program the drone flight.
Okay. So it sounds like you're looking for mostly features and structures and things like that, right? Things that you can, not artifacts.
Well, the initial methodology, of course, was directed towards pod search.
Oh, okay.
But we have, because it's what it was taking more time for us. I mean, with the structures, usually you can just go really fast until you find a structure, and then you map it, and this will take more time. But there are not that many preserved structures. In Thessaly, in fact, you could find a mound, but not much more than this. So that was the initial objective. But now we are of course we have this project in Abdira, in Thrace, also in Greece, in which we have lots of tombs, and one of the easiest way to locate them is the distribution of stones. So we are starting to use this also for the distribution of stones, also lithics, and we are trying to move now towards the differentiation of specific pottery types.
All right, cool. And what kind of, before we get too much farther, I think this will help frame exactly what you guys are doing and how you're doing it when we start talking about limitations and things. But What kind of drone equipment were you using for this? This was a couple of years ago when you were building the data for the paper, correct? Yeah. Yeah. So what are you using for that?
The initial idea of the paper, we wanted to create something that it was practical, that most people could use without much resources. Because many of the people who do survey, in some teams they don't have much money to spend to. So we just use a commercial drone, a Phantom DJI Phantom 4. So it's extremely cheap because we wanted to do it with the cheapest possible.
Absolutely.
We wanted the method to be very, very easy to reproduce.
Yeah.
So we use just this commercial drone that is relatively cheap. I'm not sure, but I think without extras, it's around $1,500 or $600. It's quite cheap.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the reason, and it worked pretty well actually. Now, of course, we are developing our own drone for survey.
Okay.
But yes, initially with a commercial drone with a good camera, and the Phantom 4, it's pretty stable. It's very secure. It's easy to program, and the camera has a resolution of 21 megapixels, which is excellent.
Yeah, that's great.
So it's a very good choice to start with this.
Yeah, I've had thoughts on that. I'd like to get your opinion on this as well. For smaller scale drone surveys, something like a Phantom or another sort of quadcopter would be okay. But the limitations you always run into are, of course, battery life and things like that, because they're only going to run for about 15 minutes, right? So one of the things, if you're doing large scale survey and you have a really high speed camera on board that can take pictures at a quicker rate, but still at a high resolution, fixed wing drones seem like they're better for, versus quadcopters, better for a large scale survey. Have you guys thought about developing fixed wing for the larger surveys?
The problem with fixed wings is that, I doubt we will be able to find a camera that can get enough resolution to record portrait sets. Take into account the ortho images we were generating for this survey. Were I don't know, 1.5 millimeter, 1.1. So every pixel was.
That's right.
So imagine, a fixed wing. It's actually using less battery because it's going fast. The wings allows less consumption of energy. So the trick is that it has to go at a certain minimum speed to be able to fly. And this speed is, we believe, is quite above what we would be able to. Of course, for if you are not interested in pottery sets, but you want to record the distribution of stones, because you are surveying, let's say, a city or, ancient city. So, yes, a fixed wing would be ideal. And they are fantastic models right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw one, I think last year, from a company out here it's not cheap. It's like $20,000, but it's
it's not that expensive.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, they do have, I think, some fixed wing options, but like I said, they're priced out for most people in this field. So So how did, after you guys did your drone surveys initially, how did those results compare with traditional pedestrian survey as far as accuracy goes?
If you compare them with the standard traditional survey, that is, you put lines every 5 or 10 meters, and you just want to do the line and record as much as possible, but you are not going to recover everything.
Sure.
It does so much better. It's much faster. We are talking here in terms of time per person. Okay, if you have 20 people, you are going to be faster than a drone. I mean, at least take into account the whole of the workflow.
Right.
But per person, that is, for this kind of survey, you only need one person and you can program the flights at home. So you basically need someone that would take the drone to the field and just, when it finishes, just changes the batteries. So it's so much faster and it's much more efficient. It locates... It's able to locate a significant percentage potsers, a much higher percentage of potsers than a 5 meters, 10 meter line survey. However, if we also compared in our initial test, we also compared with a total collection survey. You divide the area in with a grid, and then you put a person as many hours as necessary to collect everything. And okay, in this case, it was the more pottery sets were found by manual survey, but of course it was many hours of pottery collection. You have to. If somebody wants to implement this method has to think that the more potsers, the higher the density, the more efficient the method is, because you are going to take the same pictures. If you have a density of 1 or 0.5 potsers per square meter, then you have 200 potsers for square meter. So the more potsers, it's ideal for areas in which the sites are characterized by high concentrations, or ancient towns, or this kind of areas where you have a high density. The lower the density, the less efficient the method is.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. But I would like to point out something too, that something based on what you just said a little while ago was, if you have, say, 20 people out doing a survey, it's going to be quicker than a drone. But then looking at all of the factors involved, and I do cultural resource management archaeology here in North America, and I'll tell you what, if I had 20 people out there, I've got other concerns. First off, I have to pay 20 people versus one person on a drone. Yes. And second, all those 20 people could get hurt. They could sprain an ankle, they could break a leg, they could, something like that. Whereas if I have one drone operator out there and maybe a second person just for safety, that's much more efficient, even if it takes a little bit longer. So speaking of speed, I want to ask you about, so once you do the drone survey and you produce the photogrammetry, the photogrammetric images, and you've got this amazing resolution, how do you analyze the data on top of that? Do you create the 10 to 15 meter transects and keep that sample size the same, or is it a 100% analysis of the model?
Yeah, it's a 100% analysis. We analyze the whole of the ortho image, and because, that's you can do it. It's not going to take more time, perhaps a little bit more time, but it would be more difficult to actually divide the image.
Oh, sure.
We just process the whole image. At the moment we are doing this with Google Earth Engine, which is a free platform, because we wanted to keep the workflow really cheap. Okay, we could have also used a photogrammetry, a free open source even photogrammetry program for this, because to generate an ortho image does not require all the hardcore computing you would require for a true 3D reconstruction. So with Google Earth Engine, we could just implement our algorithm. Let's say the process we follow for the detection of individual potsers, and this is something that anybody can just register, copy, paste the algorithm, and just upload their own images and just press run.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. All right.
Yeah. I have to say, nobody has I know several people that have tried, and they more or less manage. So it's not that difficult. Most people get really scared around code, but we prepare the code in a very simple way. And the explanations are good. There you go. I think it can be done.
Nice. All right, we're going to take our first break. I have a bunch more questions for you, and we'll do that on the other side of this break. Back in a second. Chris Webster here for the Archaeology Podcast Network. We strive for high quality interviews and content so you can find information on any topic in archaeology from around the world. One way we do that is by recording interviews with our hosts and guests located in many parts of the world all at once. We do that through the use of Zencastr. That's Zencastr. Zencastr allows us to record high-quality audio with no stress on the guest. Just send them a link to click on, and that's it. Zencastr does the rest. They even do automatic transcriptions. Check out the link in the show notes for 30% off your first 3 months, or go to zencastr.com and use the code Archaeotech. That's ARCHAEOTECH. Looking to expand your knowledge of X-rays and imaging in the archaeology field? Then check out An Introduction to Paleoradiography, a short online course offering professional training for archaeologists and affiliated disciplines. Created by archaeologist, radiographer, and lecturer James Elliott, the content of this course is based upon his research and teaching experience in higher education. It is approved by the Chartered Institute for Archaeologists as 4 hours of training. That's in the UK, for those of you that don't know. So don't miss out on this exciting opportunity for professional and personal development. For more information on pricing and course structure, visit paleoimaging.com. That's PALEO imaging.com, and look for the link in the show notes to this episode. Welcome back to the Archaeotech Podcast. I'm Chris Webster, your host today, and we are talking to Hector about drone survey, which is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. So, in some of the questions that you posed when we set up this interview, you mentioned artificial intelligence. I'm assuming you're using artificial intelligence to, I mean, obviously it is a method of artificial intelligence just to produce the model, but, and you've mentioned an algorithm you're using to find the potsherds and things like that, I think. Is that what are you using it to artificial intelligence for anything else, or do I have that wrong? Is that what you're using to find that?
Yes, we are using machine learning algorithms, which is a subfield of artificial intelligence. And the first algorithm, at least the algorithm that is published, is a kind of random forest that, you know, it's a type of machine learning algorithm. The point of this is basically that you don't need to program a code to locate potsherds. That is, you don't need to program the whole process that is saying, for example, okay, detect everything that has this combination of pixels with this shape. This would be impossible because it's very variable. But with machine learning, what we can do is just show samples, have some kind of training data, which in our case would be images of potsherds that we detect, and we tell the algorithm that's what we are interested in. So the algorithms try to find things like that, okay? And then you can evaluate these results and say, okay, you were wrong here, you were right there. So the algorithm improves. That's what we call iterations. So, I mean, in this case, with the second iteration, we had a very good algorithm. But yeah, we did a third one just to try to fine-tune it. So yes, this is the kind of process. Now we are moving forward in another subfield of machine learning, which is called deep learning. We are using convolutional neural networks to improve the results of the detection. And okay, this is still not published. It's what we have been doing during the last month, and it really has improved quite a lot the detection rate. Also, it has improved quite a lot the way in which it detects pottery sets. I mean, the shape is much more accurate. You know, so with this new method, we can even extract measures on how sharp are the edges of the pottery sets. That could be very useful, for example, to measure erosion. You know, I mean, I think the best part of this method is that finally, with this, we can move forward from all the data we had from surveys were based on densities. I mean, densities that could be based on lines or squares or areas or fields, plots. Now we move to the actual atomic component of survey, which is the actual artifact, or the potsherd, or the lithic fragment, and this opens a whole new field for archaeological survey. I mean, it's kind of silly because we always had this. It's not a consequence of the method itself. It's how we can now record the potsherds or whatever the artifacts we are interested in. Now. We have to rethink the way in which we analyze our survey data. For example, now we can have measures of how big every individual potsherd is, how it is oriented, if it's eroded. I mean, if the shape is more roundy or it keeps sharp edges. And you can combine this data to extract measures of erosion, redeposition, what is the center, even which which areas of sites are in danger because they are closer to the surface, because obviously you will have bigger potsherds and with sharper edges. So, it's this is something that we were not very conscious when we started doing this, but looking at the amount of data, the tens of thousands of potsherds and how they distribute. I mean, this is not just one dot; it's a shape, and and this is giving incredible amounts of information.
Wow!
And with this method, with deep learning, we have boosted quite a lot the detection capability of the algorithms, but also how well it extracts the shape of every individual potsherd.
Yeah, it's amazing to me that you can use machine learning to teach your algorithm about potsherds, because I mean, I've seen potsherds all over this country, especially on the East Coast of the United States, and I'll tell you what, they come in all shapes and sizes. You know what I mean? I mean, they definitely look different than, say, the surrounding rocks, because they're usually more jagged. Yeah. But then if you have, say, a whole bottom of a vessel or something like that, like a base of a vessel, it can be just a big rounded shape. I mean, how good is it at finding these things? Or does it even need to be that good? Because if it just finds some potsherds and then there's others it can't identify, at least you know where to go, right? So then you can go out there and check that out.
Yes. It doesn't need to be that good. I mean, one of the innovations we actually introduced in this was, now this is a bit outdated with deep learning, but for the first algorithm, which is just a machine learning, a random forest algorithm, which is more simple, one of the things we realized was making the potsherds stand out is the texture. I mean, it's not the physical texture, it's not the topography of the surface, it's the difference in potsherds. I mean, when you go down to this resolution of about 1 millimeter per pixel, every potsherd is going to have at least 20 pixels. Mm-hmm. So, the difference in color between pixels, it's very little for a potsherd. When you move to the ground, which is close to it, there's lots of rugosity. The pixels have different values. And this is a very good way to detect potsherds, apart from the color, of course. Now with deep learning, of course, we have deep learning is taking into account also the variability between adjacent pixels, but also the edges, which is why it is so good at redrawing the contour of the potsherd. Mm-hmm. So it is not just the color, it's the texture, is this edge that marks a topographic difference with the surrounding area, is that these edges tend to be much more regular than anything you would find naturally. A stone, even potsherds that are relatively round, the edge is going to be much straighter than any stone. Mm-hmm. So we have problems, of course, because it would not differentiate between ancient and modern building material. I mean, in many cases, but this is relatively easy, because then when you have a concentration, you just check out what it is, and you realize very soon that it's not ancient pottery. But it's curious. It's not just the color. It's potsherds and most types of material culture we are interested in have a series of physical characteristics that differentiate them quite a lot from their surrounding environment, and this is what we are using to extract them.
Okay. Now, in that area, it sounds like potsherds are the dominant type of artifact to identify a feature or a site or something where you want to see. But what are some of the other limitations of this? I imagine one of the limitations would be you've created this to identify potsherds, and it could be identifying other stuff, but it's also not identifying other types of artifacts. Could you teach this same algorithm to search for other artifacts as well, or would you just run different algorithms over the same data set to find different things?
Yeah, that's what you usually, that's the process you follow, because in this case, the algorithm we use is not a classification. That is not telling you this is this is pottery, this is flint or or metal, and this is soil, because there would be too many classes, too many things to classify. Okay, so what we use is a probabilistic approach. That is pottery or not pottery. So in this way, it can work so much better, and you also have a percentage of success that you can use to filter out things that are not potters. And so this kind of work well. So we have also been trying to do this for lithics in Thessaly also, with some of the images we took early on. And it works pretty well. But of course, every element is a different algorithm. It doesn't make much of a difference, because the only thing you do is you just copy, paste the same algorithm, and you just change the training data.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes total sense.
And and it works well. You just you combine the results. I mean, of course, they have different success percentage. But that's something you can easily calculate and compensate for it. But there will be things you will never find. Okay, I mean, that's one of the problems of artificial intelligence. I mean, I think this is the core of your question.
Yeah.
I mean, for example, with this system, you will lose anything that you don't expect to find. And this is a big problem at the bottom. I mean, for example, we have sometimes Neolithic figurines. And some of them are impressive or beautiful, and but they have very different shapes. They are not always the same figurine, and they are broken. So, you can only detect them by the color. But they are made from local soil. So, if you don't create a specific algorithm to locate these Neolithic figurines, you will not find them. Or if you have a piece of imported material, lithic, that is imported from somewhere that differs in the shape and color than what you are expecting to find there, and you have not trained the algorithm to recognize this, you will lose it. And this is, or imagine a piece of written record, a clay tablet with a, it's a risk. I don't think this, you should just do automatic survey and forget about visiting the sites. It's just a way to be more conscious and to be more efficient, but you need to have a ceramic expert, you need to go to the field, you will just save lots of time, hopefully, if the conditions are good.
Well, let me ask you this, because I've thought about that as well, about the things that you're not programming it to find, you're losing those things. And that's what the common complaint is I've had when I've talked to people about doing drone survey. They're like, nothing beats somebody's eyes on the ground and being able to interpret something new, right? Something that's either new or we just didn't expect to see out there. So then we couldn't program it to find. That being said, it sounds like you were saying earlier in the first segment that the model is very accurate. I mean, down to a very tight resolution. So let's take a Neolithic figurine as an example. If you were looking at the model with your own eyes, not using an algorithm, you're just looking at the image, would you see that Neolithic figurine if you were zoomed in? Okay, so using that, this is one thing I've thought about. We've seen different crowdsourcing methods out there, like Galaxy Zoo, that helps to identify galaxies. SETI at Home was an early one that just used your computer, and then the National Geographic one, the Global Explorer one, that does the find signs of looting around the world. Yeah. What about taking these data? So you guys as archaeologists, you run the algorithms, you go find the things that you're expecting to find, and then you go ground truth those. But then you take the images, strip the locational data so the average person can't know where it's at, and then basically just have people scrub through these images looking for things that don't look natural and then identifying those hits. I've thought about crowdsourcing stuff like that. Is that something you guys have considered? Yeah.
We actually developed a system like that for the extraction of features from maps at some point. Mm-hmm. But yeah, well, there were some copyright issues, so we didn't go ahead with it. But yeah, we thought of it. We thought of it. The problem is having much longer time flights. You would end up with a really huge image. Okay, that would take quite a lot to analyze. I mean, yes, you can do that, but you can have 20 people or 30 people going through a relatively small field for many, many hours. The scale of this is like checking a country, because every pixel, it's a millimeter, where most people are used to satellite images like, I don't know, good resolution,
1 or 2 meters,
like Sentinel-2, 2 meters, 10 meters, Okay, this is a millimeter, so you actually, yes, that's something you could do if you have if you set up a very good system and you have lots of volunteers that are going to be checking really boring stuff. Many of these crowdsourcing methods are really exciting because people are finding things they can identify. I'm not sure if this would, but of course it's an excellent approach. We were thinking about it at some point, but well, we had our doubts of how many volunteers would be able to sacrifice their life to the altar of digital archaeology.
Hey, I'll tell you what, you put up a website and you put up images and tell people this, there's people with amazing amount of free time on their hands that will go through just image by image.
No, definitely worth a try.
Nice. So look, thinking about the archaeological field as a whole, how easy would this be to teach other people who may not be as tech savvy as you and I to be able to understand and do this?
Yeah, it's that's something we wanted to solve at some point. In fact, we asked for a project now for some money to get a real tech expert to actually develop a kind of web page in which people do not need to see the code, but they can draw their own the visible pottery sets or lithics or metal or coins or whatever in their own orthophotos, and the system will run in the background. You have this front end which is pretty easy. It's like Google Earth or something like that. You can just draw the things you are interested, and in the background the algorithm will simply multiply this data. And so images of things the algorithm has been able to find, say, is this what you want? Yes or no? So develop a more intuitive way to do that. I don't know if we will get the funding to actually do it. And the big problem is to find a supercomputing service that would actually allow to create this web front page for people to do it for free, because this is the amount of computing necessary for this kind of methodology is huge. It's big.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean that's one of the things. Now we were trying to develop our own drone that would fly for 1 hour or more. I mean, a kind of a hybrid drone. But we one of the problems will be like, if you have a drone flying for 1 hour with a high resolution camera, the amount of gigabytes you are going to end up with, I mean, taking continuous pictures, it's going to be very difficult to process. So we are starting to move to cloud processing, not just the machine learning part of the process, but also the photogrammetry part of the process. So yeah, so it's this is the bottleneck right now.
Yeah. All right. Well, aside from the funding you're looking for those things, what future developments are we looking for? Money is no object. What kind of developments would you like to see in this field? And what kind of things would you like to research given those reduced constraints?
Well, I mean, there's amazing hardware and tools out there. I mean, there are like magnetometers that you can mount on a drone.
Sure.
And it is just incredible. I think thermography could in the future play a really big role, because and also multispectral imaging. But of course, then you would need to fly the drone much lower, because the higher you go in the electromagnetic spectrum, the less resolution usually. So you have very low resolution compared to the visible light for thermal, a bit better for shortwave infrared, but it's still, you would need to fly the drone really low to get perhaps you could get, instead of 1 millimeter per pixel, you could get 1 centimeter and, and try to correlate the data. But that's something I would like to try, definitely, the short wave, infrared and the thermal, because of course, with thermal, potsherds, they have a very different thermal inertia than stones or the ground. While the ground is relatively cold, you can have a stone really hot.
Oh, yeah.
And the potsherd can be in the middle. So depending on the hour you take the picture, you will have different signals. But this would be really good. Also, we are trying to develop. The money is still an issue, but if it was not, we would like to create this drone, an hybrid drone that is using some kind of petrol or gas to fly for longer periods of time with a small radar or laser altimeter to keep the constant height to the ground with a differential RTK GPS system, so we know the exact position at every moment with a really good camera. Now there are some cameras that can be mounted on a drone with 40 megapixels, something like that, which means you can fly it much higher and take more area with a single picture, or even increase the resolution. Because when you increase the resolution, you can develop digital terrain models of the ground, which imagine the kind of to have a 3D of the topography of the ground would be many of these methods I'm sure they can be applied to other fields, any field that is interesting on whatever lies in the ground. So yeah, I think that would be really interesting. I also would like to try the drone mounted magnetometer, because I would like I think with this we can obtain very complementary kind of information.
Sure. Okay.
Also look a bit in the what's below what is visible. So yeah, this we are living a very interesting moment. Technology is moving so fast. Drones. Yeah. The first one I used, I think it was back in 2014 or so. And in just a few years, in 4 years, the quality is just incredible. It has changed so much. Now you can do things that were completely impossible 4 years, 5 years ago.
Yeah, I actually picked up the new DJI Mavic Mini a couple months ago when it first came out, just to have something a little more portable. Yeah, for certain experiences. And man, this thing is tiny, but it runs for a solid 30 minutes, can handle 20 to 25 mile per hour wind speeds and still maintain stability on that camera. And sure, the camera's got some limitations versus a higher end camera, but right tool for the right job. And this thing basically fits in your pocket. And I've got 3 batteries with it. And so I can run an hour and a half of video, and it's phenomenal. I can't imagine. I also have I have a DJI Inspire Pro 1 as well. And that thing was drone. Yeah. That thing was $5,000, and this little Mavic Mini 4 years later is taking just as good an image as that big drone from 5 years ago. Right.
Yeah. It's terrible.
Yeah.
Any money you spend on this is,
Oh, yeah.
No, one of the big limitations though with drone is the legislation is constantly changing.
Oh yeah.
And now,
yeah.
In many of the countries in which we work, you need to actually write a project in order to survey. That's one of the, looking at the future, that's going to be one of the big limitations of this methodology. It's not the kind of flight that anybody should be worried about, because at the moment the thing is flying 3 meters high.
Yeah.
And it's in areas that by definition you don't have people around, very few people.
Yeah.
But that's going to be a problem. With the Mavics, that they are supposed to be designed to be more usable in more conditions because they are extremely light. At least in Spain, they still need to go through all kind of permits. Somebody with a special permit and some special training needs to take the flight. So it's pretty complex.
Yeah. All right, Hector. Well, that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for coming on, and I really look forward to future things. If you guys get that funding and you do some other research and you put some other stuff out there, please come back on the show and tell us all about it.
Well, actually, we are using the same method, but using satellite imagery to find sites. So yeah,
cool. Yeah,
perhaps this will be another interview.
We'll bring you right back on and talk about that, because it's where everything is going. And I think doing this sort of, for lack of a better word, remote archaeology is going to be more cost affordable, because archaeology projects, whether you're doing academic archaeology or contract, in this country called just professional archaeology, there's never budget for it. There's never money. So the way, if we can increase what we can see by reducing the number of people, because people are the most expensive aspect of it, and yet still get the same, if not better, survey quality. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I have to say that, when we tried to publish this paper, there were lots of complaints from reviewers and colleagues that read the paper. Because, it's expensive to have a large team, but usually in academic archaeology, you have students, and some of them ironically complained about the poorer students. They would not get the training, but for God's sake, which kind of training it's to learn how to pick up pieces of pottery. This is not designed to take the job out of anybody. I think it's just a way to use much better the time in a more efficient way. You are going to need lots of people still, and the training is much more transferable. It's not just learn how to find the pieces of pottery in the ground that you only need a few hours or a couple of weeks to do it really, really well. So it's people. It's the big issue.
Yeah, I completely agree. We're taking people from the menial task that you can basically train almost anyone to do of finding things, and then allowing them to focus on the science, the analysis, and the research, and just let the drones do the busy work, and then we come back and do the science. Right? I mean, I think you're totally right. We don't need to focus so much on that, but in this country, most of us that do CRM archaeology or call it contract archaeology, I mean, that's what most of our time is spent doing. We don't do any science, right? We spend most of our time just walking in the desert or digging shovel tests and finding things. And then other people, a very small section of people, actually get to do the analysis and stuff like that. And I'd like to, open that up to more people.
That's terrible. Yes.
Yeah, I know. All right. Well, we've got to go, but thank you for coming on, like I said, and maybe we'll have you back on again soon to talk about the satellite stuff or some other work that you're doing. So thanks a lot, Hector.
No, thank you very much, Chris. It was really a pleasure to be here tonight.
You may have heard my pitch for membership. It's a great idea and really helps out. However, you can also support us by picking up a fun t-shirt, sticker, or something from a large selection of items from our TeePublic store. Head over to arcpodnet.com/shop for a link. That's arcpodnet.com/shop to pick up some fun swag and support the show. Hey everybody, Chris Webster here, back for the App of the Day segment for Archaeotech 121. I want to tell you about an app just in case it gets crazy popular and they start charging more for it. But I actually haven't been able to log into it on my phone, but I've looked at it online. I think they were having a problem because they were just announced on the news, but it's called Do Not Pay. And if you look up Do Not Pay, all one word, on the App Store, you'll find it. It's on the Apple App Store and the Google Play Store. But they call it the world's first robot lawyer. And basically on their homepage here at donotpay.com, it says you can fight corporations, beat bureaucracy, find hidden money, sue anyone, and automatically cancel free trials. So what some of that means is they started because the guy who developed it lives in San Francisco, and parking tickets are a huge thing there. But basically you can just punch in your parking ticket details and it automatically submits to the right agency, basically fighting the ticket. And they found that in 50% or more of cases, if you fight the ticket, you'll get it either reduced or removed. And so this just does that automatically for you. Some other things it can do is they said it'll even help you in like small claims court. It'll produce you put in all the details and it'll produce a script and it'll say this if they say this if they say this. And it's pretty good. It's been tested many, many times. One of the other things you can do is they talk about free trials, and they said what companies count on with free trials is that you're going to forget you did the free trial. So you sign up, you always have to sign up with a credit card. And then at the end of 30 days or whatever the trial period is, they just start charging your card, right? Well, these guys produce basically a credit card number that's not actually a credit card number. It's legit. And when the service tries to ping it, it comes back as a legal credit card, but it's not actually a credit card. And it goes nowhere. It's tied to no bank, no money, no anything. And if you just use it for the free trial, at the end of the free trial, it'll cancel that credit card and it'll cancel the free trial. So sounds pretty cool. I actually don't know how they make any money. I think they probably do different things like taking percentages and things like that. But you can cancel subscriptions with this. You can... Again, there's all kinds of different things. So I think we're just scratching the surface on this one, but I wanted to tell you guys about it as a quick little app of the day for all my frugal listeners out there to the Archaeology Podcast Network. Because I know if you're an archaeologist, you're always having troubles with money because we simply don't get paid enough. So this could be one way to help you save a little money, manage your subscriptions, and not get overcharged for things. So check that out, donotpay.com. Well, that's all we have for this time around. I'm hoping Paul can join in again shortly. He's had some things going on at home, so he hasn't been able to join us. He hasn't gone anywhere. He will be back at some point in the future, but until then, we've got a lot more interviews scheduled between. We're recording this at the end of January, between now and April, and a lot of exciting things coming up. So stay tuned for that, and then please share this episode wherever you heard it. If you're listening to this in a podcast player, typically you can just find the share icon right there, send it out to your socials. That helps people see it, gets more information out there to the world, and lets people know about the stuff that we're talking about. So thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Archaeotech Podcast. Links to items mentioned on the show are in the show notes at www.arcpodnet.com/archaeotech. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com and paul@lugal.com. Support the show by becoming a member at arcpodnet.com/members. The music is a song called Off Road and is license free from Apple. Thanks for listening.
This show is produced and recorded by the Archaeology Podcast Network, Chris Webster and Tristan Boyle, in Reno, Nevada, at the Reno Collective.
This has been a presentation of the Archaeology Podcast Network. Visit us on the web for show notes and other podcasts at www.arcpodnet.com. Contact us at chris@archaeologypodcastnetwork.com.
Thanks again for listening to this episode and for supporting the Archaeology Podcast Network. If you want these shows to keep going, consider becoming a member for just $7.99 US a month. That's cheaper than a venti quad eggnog latte. Go to arcpodnet.com/members for more info.